Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I was thinking as you mentioned, you're showing a picture of me. I've actually shaved that beard since then, so I guess I'm keeping the honor code.
You could write a story for $25.
I'm not sure he heard that. All right.
Yeah, I missed it, but that's okay. Well, yeah, I'm really I've been excited about this opportunity to come and speak. There's kind of two things that I thought I'd talk about. Charles mentioned in the invitation that I could just speak about what I've been working on. And there have been two main tracks that have been part of my experience here, and one has been with this mobile project. So I thought I'd start by talking about it for maybe about 20 minutes, and then I think we could have a few questions. If you have any, we could discuss them then. And then I'll talk about my dissertation for the remaining 20 minutes. And we could have questions after that. So that's my thought, if that works for you.
Yep.
Okay. All right, well, first I'd like to talk about mobile as an educational technology. Why mobile? Mobile is kind of a new kid on the block relatively. There have been literature, film, radio, TV, and others. And now mobile in the last decade especially is really just kind of exploded. Okay, great. Okay, so again, why mobile? It's a new instructional educational technology that has just really exploded. As of June 2011, there are 327 million mobile phone users in the U.S. So that's more than one per person. And so worldwide, there's around 5 billion phones that are in use. And of course, there's, whether they're smartphones and internet connected, there are trends that are showing that's, it's consistently growing and developing and non-developing countries. Okay, so right, table full of phones. This is actually a picture of a prison where, phones are consistently found and confiscated. And it's similar, the idea is that one idea popular in education is similar to prisons, to ban phones. And it's something that is kind of proliferating so much that it just isn't working very well. So another good strategy is to figure out what affordances they have and how can we use them, positive aspects of them in education. And so ARIS is a tool that I was fortunate to be around as it started 5 years ago, and it's grown. ARIS is an open source platform that it's kind of like an exploratory thing that it just exists to, in a way, send out trace results to figure out what are the locative educational affordances of mobile. So I'll tell you a little bit to help you see what I mean. These are screenshots from a lot of different projects that over the years have grown and happened because of ARIS. So let me tell you how it started first. So it began as kind of an overgrown class project. Educational technology class, and they said, do something with media that's interesting as a group. And so David Gagnon, who kind of started this project, he had the idea, okay, what if, and again, I should say we worked on a lot of the ideas that came from Kurt Squire, professor here, and work that he had done the decade before, and others with him, and at MIT, on mobile media. They used these pocket PCs, and they had tried a lot of other design experiments. And we thought, okay, we saw that a lot of good things that came from that, but also some of the limitations they had is they were locked into one design, and it was proprietary. So we thought, well, it started with David saying, okay, what if I'm going to make something in an Excel form that can talk to a website. Let's make something that would be mobile related to a museum. And so we made this game called Get In with Warhol. And the idea was, you walk up to a painting usually, or a piece of art in a museum, and you can look at it, maybe read a plaque. That's not in terms of learning about the art, we wanted to go beyond memorizing facts and being tested on it. How could you get a sense of the culture and world that's sprung this piece of art? And so we went with the Andy Warhol world, who had a very well-known social circle. And we thought, what if you came to this art exhibit that was happening at the time in Milwaukee, and you had a goal, which was to get inside the inner circle, social circle of Andy Warhol. So you go in and you can go to different paintings and you interact with the artists that created that painting. And they actually talk with you and similar to a role-playing game, give you quests. And you ask you to do things like deliver a soup can to Andy Warhol for one of his paintings. So it's almost kind of a Forrest Gump-like story structure where you take on the role of a fictional character and you're kind of a part of the creation of these paintings. So that was a good learning experience. It was very challenging. We got to the point of making these things as websites that could come up and hadn't even gotten to it being functional on a phone. It just so happened so that was a success. It just so happened 2 months later, the iPhone was released. And we thought, well, this is an interesting platform that we could continue this project on. So Dave Gagnon and I and others continued to iterate on this project. And over the years it grew and we were able to do more, and we just kind of kept the principle of let's find things that are interesting and figure out what it means to use a mobile phone in terms of location. And so these top 3 categories here are kind of what have bubbled up as activities a lot of people have swarmed around over the years. One can be thought of as an interactive case, kind of what I told you earlier, the kind of Forrest Gump-like linear experience where you are taking on a role, you have a goal, non-linear, and you have quests distributed to you and you're interacting with characters. This has been something some museums have done or have explored. Minnesota Historical Society has one they've worked on for a few years using those. And second is a situated documentary, which I'll show you in a moment. And then field research is another interesting one that is programmers here have been working on, and it's about on the cusp to be a tool people can use. One example of field research with mobile is civic science and doing data collection. There's an expert here, a professor who studies ornithology, and so bird calls. And he actually has an algorithm developed that can identify a bird call with a 99% accuracy. And so they're working with Harris code to basically make a tool that would let anyone with their phone out in the wilderness or anywhere, they hear a bird call, record that bird call. That signal will talk to a database, come back and show you what bird you're listening to. And so there's a lot of that can not only inform scientists' work, if suddenly a lot of people are sending them messages of what birds they see, but it also means interesting things for our education, meaning that what layers of activity can you integrate on top of that type of interaction with the world. And then another thing right now that's happening with the project is the DML, Digital Media Learning Badging Competition. Badges are being talked about so much now, and ARIS has 2 proposals that are being considered for that. So accreditation structures around mobile learning is another trajectory. So I just want to show you 2 projects really quickly that have come from ARIS. One is called Mentira. So this is a professor in New Mexico, teaches Spanish as a second language, Chris Holden. And he talks about how it's kind of ironic that students are learning about how to speak Spanish in these, the walls of the school from a lot of the time non-native speakers, when they're surrounded by communities of speakers that do speak it natively. And so, using mobile phone, he created a class activity where students go and they play through an interactive murder mystery. And so they walk around the community, and this picture on the lower left is what you would see on your phone. You're walking through and interacting with non-player characters, digital characters. And also there's certain instances where you're near a building and you're in a restaurant, and part of the game is to go and interact and talk with someone that runs that restaurant, learn information that's specific to that location. And so that's one activity that's happened. To share a situated documentary example, Jim Matthews is a middle school teacher here in Madison, and he made this documentary about an event that happened here in Madison in the 60s, where there were protests that occurred during the Vietnam War because Dow chemical recruiters were coming to the campus. So Jim Matthews thought, okay, I want my students to learn about this event, but what if I could immerse them in it in the location where it took place? So what you would do if you were here and trying it out, this is what you would see on your phone. You would be walking, and phone would vibrate, GPS, talk to your phone and told it, Dow Day, someone made a game called Dow Day here. You open it up and it says, it's October in the 60s, you are a reporter, and this event is happening. Go see your editor, and he's going to give you an assignment. So you walk over to where the editor is, GPS goes off again, and it shows you using Google Maps where to go. You walk over, and then you see, there's your editor. I think it's probably one of the best pictures we've ever used. And so he tells you, yeah, go and talk to everyone you can around this issue. We want to get multiple perspectives of what's going on. So this is a learning goal of Jim Matthews, because he wanted students to consider what the protesters thought, police thought, students thought, administrators, all the while collecting primary documents. So then suddenly your map shows that you have options of where you could go. And scroll through these. You meet someone, a non-player character, he asks you questions, this Dow recruiter, and tells you what Dow's perspective is. So as you walk around, you see a rally going on. And then videos show up. And this is one of the most memorable moments people say from this experience. You're on this hill where these protests partly occurred in Bascom Hill, and you can see a video of protesters marching the spot where you're standing. So it's almost like a window to another town. So you're able to see the familiar buildings and what happened previously. So, just to wrap up here, I just wanted to share, tidbits where I could, if these are kind of things that are interesting to you. Probably two of the most influential things that I know I've read while I've been here, and that have really influenced our work on ARIS and in other game-based learning approaches, is situated learning perspective that James Paul G. uses in this book. He offers principles that we can learn from games as a medium, as we could be applied to not only game design, but just the design of learning environments. And then Kurt Squire's article on video games as designed experience. It really helps articulate, has helped articulate my thinking about how you can take content and what games helps us to do with content that's different than, say, didactic types of teaching and learning, is you can take content and instantiate it as a world that has its own set of rules and ideologies that it can communicate by immersing somebody within it, and through going through the processes of interacting and hypothesizing and trying things out in this world, we can learn things that are unique and that the medium can specifically afford.
Hey Chris, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
On the GPS location devices, the one that you showed us there on the campus in medicine, about how much were you able to narrow it down to a specific geographic area? What's the smallest area that you could identify within which you could have it accurately identify and call people in that area?
Yeah, so when we started, it was about 2 blocks.
Oh, wow.
That's probably not being modest. But, it's really gotten better. And now it's probably to the point of, let's see, on a good day when it's not cloudy and you're in and weather's not impacting it, you can probably get it within 5 to 10 feet, actually.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And I'll show you where there's actually, so here's what the editor looks like. So this tool there's 2 parts to it. There's the online editor, and then there's the client, what you see on the phone. And so this is the editor you see, and it's not on this shot, but you open up, you place something on the map, and you have a little editor screen, and you can tell it what range you want to have. There's a ratio between the more specific you get, the weaker the signal could be, and the bigger you get, the easier it is for it to be more dependable. So, yeah, it still depends on things. If you're near a lake, it can be tricky. Okay, so I think I'll end this part of the presentation. This is a page that was just created about a month ago. It's been fun to see who's using Eris and where in the world. And so I took this screenshot this morning. And so this is total. There have been about 4,500 players. And so this week, there have been 118 players at a game in Minnesota museum. Dow Day is at 19 players. And Materials, that's 6. I'll tell you a little more about the places they've been, but I first want to mention this has been an open source project that we've been trying to be mindful of what the open education community is trying to do. And a large part of that conversation is how do we sustain something like this that's free. And so this just shows one of the strategies we've kind of just naturally taken on that's worked has been to hold events. And so these are where you see these numbers spike of how many visits we've had. They've been during events we've held, game jams. What we've done is we've said at this time for 3 days, 1 day, we're just going to block out our schedules and do a lot of work and just try and make something. We go through, we use agile, scrum-like design processes and just do a lot. And we'll think of a lot. And our whole goal is to just do things that are cool. Not even necessarily educational, but kind of they naturally are because it's educators who mostly participate. So we used Adobe Connect at 1. This jam was in 2011. And it was really nice to have that social presence there. On this screen here, there are people, one was from the Netherlands, another group is from Spain. There were a few in New York, a few in LA, Minnesota, a lot of schools here in the Madison area, New Mexico. And there was a boy from Colombia who was 12. So it was just really energizing and really good for the community. One last thing I want to say about, looks like text might be cut off there, but we basically followed an endowment, institutional partnership exchange model. We've been really fortunate to be supported by an academic technology group here through some grants through Kurzweil. And as we've grown, it's been interesting to see that it's while the tool is free and anybody can take this code and do what they want with it, a lot of organizations want people who have expertise around the tool. And so they will pay for consultants to come and help run workshops or just talk about what this is to get people interested in it, or to run workshops and make things. And so that's been interesting to see how financially that can work. And so here, this group is a program here in UW-Madison is called Engage, and it's an academic technology group that's embraced ARIS. It's embraced ARIS and is, putting more funding into it. So more and more programmers are coming on the project. And like I said before, the field research aspects of it are kind of have the attention of the team. I think I'll conclude there. There's a few questions, maybe we can talk about those.
Any questions? We got one over here.
I have a question about the augmented reality capabilities of the ARIS platform. Is that something that's built in or something that you have to do externally and add in?
Yes, the augmented reality things you see, like the media, it's all part of ARIS. So if you went right now, you could go to the iTunes store, look up ARIS, download it on your iPhone, and see if there are any games or activities near you. But in terms of features, it's whatever's there that you can get in the iTunes store is, that's there. If you wanted to add something, if you had the programming know-how, you could take the code and make something. Actually, that's what we encourage people to do. So many people keep asking if we have it for Android, and we would love to, we just haven't had the manpower to do it yet. And so that's something we encourage, and kind of the process that we encourage is, if you want to make something, please do it, and we'd appreciate it if you showed us what you made, so we could fold it into the tool. That hasn't really happened much. There's been more collaboration sharing about our documentation around how to use it by educators teaching logic, authoring processes, things like that.
Charles has a question.
Yeah, Chris, is the editor a application that runs on a computer, or is it? Can you do the game editing from an app itself?
Can I add to that question?
Yeah.
So I was going to say, from a technical perspective, I noticed that the editor is built in Flex, so it's a Flash-based application.
Right.
Are you guys? Do you automatically have a compiler on your end that'll compile it to your Mac? Your iOS, or do you guys actually go through and compile it from Flash? You take the information from there and you manually put it into an iOS format.
Right. Yeah. There's a compiler happening, so it's not something that someone has to go and do regularly. But there's actually, if we could do it over, we would make this. We would not use Flex and Flash, and we'd make something that would align to HTML5. So that has our attention right now. Right now, we're not at that threshold where it's worth it to restructure the whole thing. But I think eventually that's our plan, is to go to HTML5. Let's see, the earlier question was, the editor it's an online web page, and so anyone can access the editor on any platform or browser. And it would be really nice to be able to edit these as you're out playtesting. But for right now, there's not an editor interface on the phone.
So how much technical knowledge does it take for someone to actually create a mobile activity in using ARIS?
Well, the whole goal has been to make this something that non-programmers could use. And so, teachers have been one of our primary target audiences. So you see this editor here, we spent a lot of time designing it so that it kind of matched kind of a PowerPoint-ish interface. But and so mainly what you do, it's largely drag and drop. You say you want to create a game, and then there's 3 basic objects you can create. So down in the lower left, you would click Add Object, and you could create a character, an item, or a plaque. And a plaque is kind of what you'd think of. It's just something that will stay in one place that has information. And so you drag those things out onto the map where you author information about it. And the technical part that is tricky, despite any efforts you can make, is that this is the logic-based authoring, where in this procedure, if the player does one thing, that triggers new things that weren't possible before. And so that's what you see here at this bottom, these requirements exchanges. That does get technical. And so in how that's working out in the community is actually somebody with the global kids group in New York City, Barry Joseph. He and his group actually just last week, they made a Google Doc where they made a face-to-face game people can play to learn authoring logic. I think they call it Red Routing. And so it was interesting to see. They made this document, they shared it with the community, and people have been commenting on it. And so it's a game that they're going to have people play before they get into Eris, so they kind of get what it means to do that logic authoring. So yeah, it's for non-programmers, but it is still a technical authoring process.
So does anybody use this for maybe a virtual geocache?
Or tour?
Or a tour, yeah. Tours, yeah, we kind of saw that, but you could do a geocache type of thing where you send people around to places, and when they get there, there's a video, that type of thing. That's kind of what it's used for.
Right, yeah. There's those, right, the kind of virtual tour-like things. That's a really common one, because and that's actually how a lot of times these workshops happen with people who are new to the tool. That's one of the first activities that is kind of useful to do. Put stuff around, and it's just kind of a scavenger hunt. At this museum center here, it's called the Discovery Center. They wanted, they have this lobby, like a town center commons area, and they wanted a virtual tour. For people that come in with their phones, they can actually just learn about the exhibits they see. So we did that, and then we said we want to make a kind of quest-based game too. So they let us do that, even though they didn't really where you were trying to fix these exhibits, and while trying to fix them. Yeah, it's been really interesting, a fun project, and so.
Hey, Chris,
if you're interested, you feel free to let me know. And it's online. You could try making things. There are also interesting gospel-related applications to this that certainly on my mind was made a few. I think when I first talked to Charles about it, I was trying out some things on Temple Square to see if they would work. Church employees tried them out. The tool is so new and it was pretty funky. I think there's a lot of potential in this area of locative, mobile.
Chris, I have another question. What kind of research questions and projects are you doing around this Eris tool and this concept of local access to data?
Like what kind of research projects am I personally doing, or
sure.
You
and or your the research team, the faculty that you're working with. What are the interesting questions that you guys are asking yourselves around this project?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it seems like such a moving target sometimes. It's just up to individuals and what they want to know. But yes, some that I see, definitely civic engagement and place-based learning is one area of inquiry that a lot of that Professor Squire and others that have studied with him here, that's been a big goal of theirs. You know, taking one of their questions is how can mobile be used to encourage civic awareness and an attitude of ownership among people. So, that research area kind of sees the mobile phone as kind of a rerouter. Like it's technology, but it's something that kind of reroutes people's attention back on communities around them or wilderness areas, where it gets students out into parts of cities or communities they might not otherwise go to and learn about them. But yeah, I'd have to say that's a really good question. I think it's mostly what are the questions is the research question in a way. Like, let's make things that are interesting and that we think are worthwhile, like second language learning or data collection, civic science, and then just try and figure out what we could ask about it. So it all feels really immature as a field to us.
Have you looked at Michael Grant's work very much, I would imagine?
No, actually.
He's somebody you should probably look at in terms of mobile learning. It's a space that he took a sabbatical last year for a full year to study it out. And I think he's probably somebody you should connect with if that's what you're interested in.
Thanks. Yeah. That's great. Well, I see we have about 15 minutes left, so if it's okay, I'd like to just share this last part.
Yep.
Okay. So here's my intermission slide. So now we're all mentally. Okay, well, this is my dissertation. When I came here, I was very interested in stories, and it was interesting hearing the announcement at the beginning about sharing stories about teaching. Stories have a lot to do with how we learn, communicate, and that's always been interesting to me. And so has innovative, interactive technologies. And so I decided I had quick experience as I came here on that premise, and I was in my first semester, and we had a class assignment to create an educational technology. So I partnered up with someone from Taiwan, and we were making a website about Taiwan to teach people about Taiwan. And made it very encyclopedic. There was a tab to learn about politics, about food, about people, culture. And I brought it to my professor, and then he looked at it from the lens and he said, you might want to think about having some kind of a story to this. And it just felt like it was a really memorable moment for me because that was the big reason I didn't even come here in the first place. And here I was making a very, informational, direct instruction-like tool. And so then I decided, okay, narrative. Yeah, how do I storify this thing? I kind of didn't know where to start. And so that's what I decided to research an educational game design group and do a case study how they designed the game, to see what they thought about narrative as they worked and what they actually did with narrative. What were the design decisions, processes that they did that would help other game designers or others just making and learning experiences so they could integrate narrative to make learning situations more engaging. So the main problem that I argue for is that students are largely disengaged from education to the point of dropping out. And so narrative is a phenomenon that has been shown to engage, and it's not just a representational form, but it's also a mode of thought. It's a way we think and a way we communicate. Video games are an engaging type of design experience, and so there is already research done on looking at how narrative can be designed into an educational game to increase engagement and immersiveness. But there's not much really out there known about how designers actually do it. A lot of what's known is people taking games and analyzing them, or designers kind of sharing their debriefing of how they made what they did. But there's not much doing academic studies on the design process. So knowing this, a lot of, if you're out in the field, and it's even just to see, if you look for educational video games, there's a lot that aren't compelling, don't seem very well made. And I think that's largely because we don't know how to make them real. It's not that it's a necessarily bad medium, but we have work to do to figure out how to do it well. So there's different ways to think about narrative. It's a huge topic. There's the traditional kind of classical notions of narrative, where it's boiled down. It's a sequence of events. It's one event happening after another, and in that traditional sense, it's through some kind of a medium, speaking, movies, theater. There's new academic notions and new theories coming up is that saying narrative, sequences of events aren't necessarily medium dependent, but it's also a cognitive phenomenon. It's more than just what you might see in the movie. From a game player perspective, narrative is, you think about playing a game, and what do you do after if you've probably told them some kind of story of what happened. And probably what you would say are things happened that were interesting or unexpected. And so the cognitive theories that I kind of really went in depth into and built this study on from Jerome Bruner and Roger Schenck talk about narrative as this mechanism that lets us go through experiences, we kind of storify those experiences, and then in doing so, we form new expectations of what is going to come. But when those expectations are violated, that's when we learn and remember. From a designer's point of view, story can be embedded into the game and promotes emotion and immersion. And then for an educational game designer, narrative can be something. It's kind of like this holy grail in a way. It's something that could engage and help teach at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to go pretty quickly. But basically, like I said, we just don't know what the design part of narrative in games is all about. So these are the two questions that I came up with. How do designers use narrative? And then how do they think about perceiving? These are pretty closely related, but there is enough of a difference there. So I had to choose a game. So there's a game company here who said I can use their name because it's actually kind of just a promotion for them, but it's Filament Games. Filament like the light bulb. And they've kind of come out of UW-Madison in some ways, and they do a lot of their design work based on these situated learning theories. And so this game was happening as I was starting my study, citizen science. And the goal of this game is to promote civic science literacy. And so they put players in this world, and you're an everyday kind of kid, and it's this fantastical situation where there's a lake that's dirty. And there's this spirit that represents the lake, and she basically says, you are kind of the chosen one to make a difference. And the way you can make a difference is by persuading other people to behave differently and to change policies. So that main game mechanic that people go through is argumentation. So there's actually this argument constructor. You're working with, as you discover things, you're finding out evidence, and you construct arguments to persuade people to do things like stop their manure from running off into rivers. There's other mini activities, like using Secchi discs, lowering them, doing what scientists actually do to measure lake health. And these things kind of build up, and eventually you're making big, grand arguments that form policies. Character of a muskrat actually turns on you. First he's a sidekick, then he decides that because unclean lakes actually benefit the population of muskrats, he tries to persuade other people. And then it ends with time travel. Well, time travel is a part of it. You actually go back in time to persuade people in the 70s, come back to the present, and then yourself in the future to help you save the lake in the future. So that's citizen science. So I did this. This was a single case study. Dave worked on this project for about 4 years, and I was there for about 1.5 years of it. So I did a lot of interviewing, observed meetings, and analyzed documents, design documents. So downside is I can't really generalize what I've learned, because it's only one study. But I can describe as much as I can that I think is interesting that could lead in the right directions. So what did I find out? This is, from a narrative point of view, this is the process that was undertaken. One thing to point out, it seemed like an obvious little thing, but actually it's one of my key findings is that when they begin this iteration cycle, they have a narrative. One designer wrote up this summary of the narrative, the overarching narrative. So it's kind of like what you'd think of if you read a book. It's just a few chapters that summarizes what happens from point A to point B. This was an adventure game, so that's easy to do. It's linear genre. But that really influenced what everyone else was able to do. Programmers, artists. This was a document that grounded them and anchored. But another professional game designers told me it would be just as useful for non-narrative games as well as narrative games. Okay, so I found out created a typology for 7 things designers use narrative for, and there's 7 things that they perceive about narrative that I pointed out. And just the key ones that I'll mention, one is that they saw narrative as a reward structure. And so what is reward? What do rewards mean? And for them, they meant rewards would help players want to continue playing. And suspense became a part of that. Finding out something, but there's an uncertainty about what's going to happen next. Would help people feel compelled to go forward. So an example of that is they were given photographs from others that showed the lake. It was kind of a Back to the Future feature where the lake would change colors as you made, it would become cleaner in the picture as you made good arguments. And so that was a reward moment. A narrative moment when you saw the picture and the lake changed. That became a rewarding moment. And when it was given at the beginning, it became a compelling reason. I mentioned the overarching narrative document. This is what it looks like. Again, it's just kind of simple and small, but something that shows a lot of potential to really just help make good games. To keep everyone on the same page and united with the same vision. And lastly, thematic signaling became a concept that was useful, that Richard Swan from BYU developed in his dissertation. And what I found out was, let me start with the example, and I'll be done. One of the mini games that they had in this game was picking up trash. You can see a can floating there in the water. And this was a common misconception they wanted to address, that picking up trash is minimally helpful. It doesn't really help a lake become less eutrophic and safe to swim. But they added this in there because they wanted people to see that even though you do it, it's not really seeing the lake. And so this thematic signaling idea is that you can embed things that imply a narrative. If you see a logo in front of a game cover, and it's a basketball game, you think of the genre of basketball, and you form expectations about it. So I just kind of suggest that what we need to do is in educational video games is incorporate these misconceptions, these false expectations, more prominently at the beginning of an experience. So when you see this splash screen, what if there was trash all over it? That might imply that, okay, you're going to pick up trash to save the lake. But then as you interact with the world, you find out that that actually isn't the case. One limitation was design work is hard to track. It's really unpredictable, and everyone was spread out. So that was another limitation in the study. And with, I'll just say, emergent narrative, the stories players come up with is an area that really isn't looked at much if you don't know a lot about, but it's the thing that everyone cares about. So how can that line up with assessments of games is a place we can look in the future. Okay, and then that's it. So thanks for listening to that. And I don't know if we have time or people need to go, but we could have questions if